I hope this has been an as lightening experience for you all as it has been for me. This was one book I avoided reading for a long time, but every time anybody read it in the other churches, whoever they are, I don't call anybody out. That's not my purpose here. Everything was a little bit different when it was read. And they put a lot of things in here that weren't here, and a lot of the things that were here were skipped over. And as I have a lot of the books, read it alone by myself, and things read a little bit different, and not necessarily version to version, but the basic stuff that we had read for a long time, it skipped over. And a lot of people continue to read the book that way. One verse here and one verse there. And in doing that, what happens is it basically becomes whatever you want it to say. And if keys were like that, you would have every access to everybody's house. You don't want that. You don't want to say you did that. You don't want that. But you don't want that. Trust me, you don't want that. And that's what they wanted to do here, and they didn't want that either, but they didn't want you to know that they did want that.
In other words.
Mm-hmm. Read it for yourself. The short version. Read it for yourself. But for this part of Ezekiel's story, though, and more specifically, Israel's story, on its face, a lot of this stuff is repetitive. It's repetitive for a reason. On its face, it may seem unduly repetitive, but Yahweh Elohim is finally trying, one last time, to get through to his people that he will kill them if they don't truly change, not surface change, truly change, and repent of their abominable practices and evil deeds. So many times they promise to change, and when things start to go well for them, they return to their sins and abominable practices. There was a reason for this, encapsulated in the old proverb, here misapplied to Yahweh Elohim. You've heard this before. The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. This popular proverb both expressed and promoted a popular idea. The idea was that Elohim was, get this, unfair. Unfair in not punishing the fathers as they deserved, and unfair in punishing the present generation. I'll clear this up by reading through, starting in Ezekiel, the 17th chapter, the first verse. Ezekiel, the 17th chapter, the first verse. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, put out a riddle and speak a parable to the house of Israel. And say, so says the sovereign Yahweh, a great eagle with great wings, long of pinion, full of feathers, who had different colors. There's a little bit of a read here that is still done in these days. And it ropes us back into this part. And it has a dual meaning. The meaning that is expressed here, and also the expressed meaning in the modern days, especially of this eagle. And whenever you had an eagle in this part of the book, it was claiming the greatest bird there was, the eagle. If you ever see an eagle fly, that's the only bird. How much wind is there? They never flutter. They never flutter. That thing just flies. And that's why they called Judah the eagle. But in the last days, every nation also has a bird or something associated with them. The bear is who? Russia. Yes. The eagle is who? United States. And it goes through like that. Even here, the same thing is here for these different birds. They have a representative in these words. A great eagle, returning to the script. A great eagle with great wings, long of pinion. That's the strikers, or the pluckers. The claws. Long of pinion, full of feathers, who had different colors. Who has ever seen an eagle with rainbow colors? He was saying something here on two levels. He was talking about them as if they were in the modern age, and in their actions, they were acting like they are now, even here. And that's what he's saying in the Bible's very nuanced way. Who had different colors, came to Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. He plucked off the top of its twigs and carried it into a land of traders. He set it in a city of merchants. Now you're getting the symbolism as it is now. He carried it into a land of traders or merchants. He set it in a city of merchants, traders. Verse 5. He also took of the cedar land and planted it in a fruitful field. More commerce. He placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree. Keep the commerce going. and it grew and became a spreading low vine whose branches turned toward him, and its roots were under him. So it became a vine and brought out branches and shot out boughs, or grew even larger. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. And behold, this vine bent its roots toward him and shot out its branches toward him, that he might water it away from the beds of its planting. Away from the beds of its planting? That's in a different direction, away from the nourishment. It was planted in a good soil by great waters, that it might bring out branches, and that it might bear fruit to be a splendid vine. So says the sovereign Yahweh, shall it prosper? Shall he not pull up its roots and cut off its fruit and wither it? All the leaves of its sprouting shall wither. Wait a minute. This thing is by a riverside. It has plenty of water. What is causing it to not grow? Its actions. And not with great arm, nor by many people, shall any raise it by its roots. And behold, being planted, shall it prosper? Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind touches it? It shall wither in the beds where it sprouted. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, say now to the rebellious house, do you not know what these things mean? Tell them, behold, the king of Babylon has come to Jerusalem. Just like now. And has taken its king and its rulers, and brings them to himself, to Babylon. And he has taken of the king's seed, and has made a covenant with him, and has taken an oath from him. He has also taken the mighty of the land, so that the kingdom might be low, that it might not lift itself up, but by keeping his covenant, it might stand. Now he is claiming results first. Then if you do what I say do, you'll rise up. But here it says what did they do? But they rebelled against him in sending his ambassadors into Egypt to give him horses and many people. Shall he be blessed? Shall he who does such things escape? You know that answer already. Or shall he break the covenant and be delivered? As I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, surely in the place of the king who made him king, whose oath he despised, and whose covenant he broke, even with him in the midst of Babylon, he will die. Nor shall Pharaoh with his great mighty army and great company with him for him in the war, by pouring out siege mounds and building forts to cut off many persons. And he has despised the oath by breaking the covenant. And behold, he has not given his hand and has done all these, he shall not escape. Therefore, so says the sovereign Yahweh, as I live, surely my oath that he has despised and my covenant that he has broken, I will even repay it on his head. Verse 20, and I will spread my net on him, and he shall be taken in my snare, and I will bring him to Babylon. And I will judge him there with his sin, which he has sinned against me. He thought by aligning himself with Egypt, and he would get away with it. And he just used Babylon to punish him anyway. And all his fugitives with all his bands shall fall by the sword. And those who remain shall be scattered toward all winds in every direction. And you shall know that I, Yahweh, have spoken. So says the sovereign Yahweh, I, even I, will also take of the top of the highest cedar and will set it. I will crop off from the first of its young twigs a tender one, and will plant it on a high and lofty mountain. In a mountain, in a high place of Israel I will plant it, and it shall bear boughs, leaves, and bear fruit, and be a majestic cedar. And under it shall dwell every bird of every wing. In the shadow of its branches they shall dwell. And all the trees of the field shall know I, Yahweh, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree to flourish. This is an end time prophecy. How do I know that? Everybody expects Israel to win. The only way they win is he comes back and rescues them. They're going to lose this final war if he doesn't. And nobody expects that, because they have the modern eagle on their side, the United States. And the bear has aligned itself with their enemy, Iran. And they didn't think of this back then, but because that stuff wasn't happening back then. But Yahweh was there at the beginning, and he's going to be there at the end. And he sees ahead to all this. And he kind of cloudedly shows his people these things if they go back and read it for themselves with their own eyes. The soul that sins shall die. Continue at Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, the first verse. The the word of Yahweh came to me again, saying, what is it to you that this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the teeth of the sons are set on edge? As I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, to you there is no longer any occasion to use this proverb in Israel. Why? They've already gone against it. They have their own stuff on their own heads now. The sons had nothing to do with it. This is their own sins that I'm going to hold against them. Verse 4. Behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, also the soul of the Son. They are mine. The soul that sins, it shall what? Die. But a man that is just and does what is just and right, and has not eaten on the mountains, nor has lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel. Whose idols? The house of who? They've got their own idols now. And if they have idols, who are they not worshiping? It all comes together when you read it for yourself, doesn't it? Everybody is over there championing Israel now, that Israel isn't even working with their father anymore. Verse 6 again. And has not eaten on the mountains, nor has lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, nor has defiled his neighbor's wife, nor has come near. Some people say that this is okay now to do. It's not okay, even now, to come near a menstruating woman. Verse 7, and has not ill-treated any man, but has given the debtor's pledge back to him. What's that all about? If somebody is short of money and you loan them money and you exchange their coat or cloak, at the end of the day, you have to give that cloak back. That's what he's talking about here. Has given the debtor's pledge back to him, his cloak or coat. Has robbed none by violence. Has given his bread to the hungry, and has covered the naked with a garment. He has not given out usury, interest, in other words. This whole country is mounted on the backs of the insurance companies, the banks, the credit card companies. I sent out something about that this week already. If you read that, you never use your credit cards again. Too much. That video showed you explicitly how you can borrow $5,000 from them, and within a couple of years you owe back 15 or more, and they immediately take you down to a minimum payment, and you could pay on that minimum payment all your life. That's why the Bible says that no interest will be taken. And if you got that email, you notice that the part that included those scriptures is not there. But whenever I send something out like that, I'm expecting something to happen to it. And if you right-click on that thing, it all comes up in blue. And you can read it. And now it'll be coming in context for you, because the missing pieces are going to be back. Eight again for clarity. He has not given out on usury, nor has taken any increase. He has withdrawn his hand from iniquity, has done judgment between man and man, has walked in my statutes, and has kept my judgments to deal truly. He is righteous. He shall surely live, says the sovereign Yahweh. And if he fathers a son who is violent, who sheds blood, and who does to a brother any of these, which they had, even if he does not do any of these himself, but his son has, but has even eaten on the mountains, and has defiled his neighbor's wife. Verse 12, has ill-treated the poor and needy. Thieving he stole, has not given back the pledge, and has lifted up his eyes to the idols, has committed abomination, has loaned on usury or interest, and has taken increase or interest. Shall he then live? He shall not live. He has done all these abominations. He shall surely die. His blood shall be on him, not the Father, the Son himself. Everybody has to atone for their own sins. That's what he was talking about when he said that proverb wasn't the same anymore. Every generation has to do their own punishment for their own sins. Not the Father's sins go down automatically to the Son's sins. No, everybody has to pay for their own sins. He shall not live. He has done all these abominations. He shall surely die. His blood shall be on him. And lo, if the fathers have a son who has seen all his father's sins, which he has done, and fears, and does not like him, who has not eaten on the mountains, nor has lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, has not defiled his neighbor's wife, has not ill-treated any man, has not withheld the pledge, nor has robbed by violence, but has given his bread to the hungry, and has covered the naked with clothing, has withdrawn his hand from the poor, has not received usury nor increase, has done my judgments, has walked in my statutes, he shall not die. For the iniquity of his father, he shall surely live. His father, because he extorted, robbed his brother by robbery, and did what is not good among his people, lo, even he shall die in his iniquity. Yet you say, why does not the Son bear the iniquity of the Father? When the Son has done justice and right, he has kept all my statutes and has done them, he shall surely live. The soul that sins, it shall die. The Son shall not bear the iniquity of the Father, nor shall the Father bear the iniquity of the Son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be on him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be on him. Everybody pays for their own stuff. But if the wicked will turn from all his sins, which he has committed, and keep all my statutes, and do justice and right, he shall surely live. He shall not die. Becoming a little bit clearer now, huh? Verse 22. All his transgressions that he has done, they shall not be mentioned to him. For so long, so many people characterized the Old Testament God as so evil and so not righteous and unfair, but they were reading this wrong all the time because they were skipping over certain things and making it as if God was wrong to do this. And you read the whole thing and he was right to do it. (23) Do I actually delight in the death of the wicked? Says the sovereign Yahweh. It is not that he should turn from his ways and live. Is it not that he should turn away from his ways and live? But when the righteous turns from his righteousness and does injustice and does according to all the abominations that the wicked do, shall he live? And that's where the wrong interpretation comes. They skipped to this and said that God was wrong. Yahweh was wrong. In context, it comes together quite well. All his righteousness that he has done shall not be remembered. In his trespass, he has trespassed, and in his sin, he has sinned. In them, these new sins, he shall die. 25. Yet you say, the way of Yahweh is not fair. Hear now, O house of Israel. Is not my way fair? Are your ways not unfair? When a righteous one turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity and dies in them for his iniquity that he has done, he shall die. And again, when the wicked turns away from his wickedness that he has committed and does that which is lawful and righteous, he shall save his soul alive. Seems very fair to me. 28. Because he looks carefully and turns away from all his sins that he has committed, he shall surely live. He shall not die. Yes, says the house of Israel, The way of Yahweh is not fair. No. O house of Israel, are not my ways fair? Are not your ways unfair? So I will judge you, O house of Israel, each one of you according to his ways, says the sovereign Yahweh. Turn and be made to turn from all your sins, and iniquity shall not be your stumbling block. Cast away from you all your sins by which you have sinned, and make you a new heart and a new spirit. For why will you die, O house of Israel? For I have no delight in the death of him who dies, says the sovereign Yahweh. Therefore turn and live. Clear that up real quick, huh? Ezekiel, the 19th chapter, the first verse. And that opening line for this one is a lament for the princes of Israel. They were actually kings, but the writer here is sovereign Yahweh. And he says they're princes. They're princes. Ezekiel, the 19th chapter, the first verse. And take up a weeping for the rulers of Israel, and say, what is your mother? Who else would talk about your mama and get away with it but the Almighty? What is your mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions. She multiplied her cubs among young lions, and she brought up one of her cubs. It became a strong lion and learned to tear the prey and ate men. The nations also heard of him. He got a name for himself. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains to the land of Egypt. The nations said against him from the provinces on every side. He's talking about Jehoiakim here, who rebelled against his Babylonian overlords. Nebuchadnezzar brought an army against him from the many nations and provinces under his empire, aroused into action against the perpetrator of these deeds, this young lion who headed Jerusalem at the time. Not because of their superior righteousness, but because of the judgment of Yahweh Elohim on the king of Judah and his rebellion against Yahweh. Ezekiel, the 19th chapter, you continue at the 5th verse. And when she saw that she had waited and that her hope was lost, she took another of her cubs and made him a strong lion. Never give up, do they? Never give up. It would have been so much easier to just give in and do what Yahweh said. And you got to go your own way. She fed another one of her cubs to them. Verse 6, and he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion and learned to tear the prey and ate men. And he knew his widows, and he laid their cities waste. He did a little bit better than his brother did. And the land in its fullness was desolated from the sound of his roaring. And the nations set against him on every side from the provinces and spread their net over him. He was taken into their pit, and they put him in a cage in chains and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him into hunting nets so that his voice should never again be heard on the mountains of Israel. She kept doing it. But she was plucked up in fury. There came a day when Elohim no longer blessed Israel and her kings. When they persistently rebelled against him, she was cast down to the ground as a result, again, of Elohim's judgment. Her strong branches were broken and withered, with the strong branches representing her later kings. Now she is planted in the wilderness. Yahweh Elohim transplanted the vine and took it to an unpleasant place, Babylon. Babylon wasn't a literal wilderness, but it was certainly one for Elohim's exiled kings and people. Continuing at Ezekiel, the 19th chapter, the 10th verse. Your mother is like a vine in your blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches because of many waters. And she had strong rods for scepters, those lions that she kept sacrificing on the altar of her own avarice, her own ability to lead by many sons that she sacrificed to these people to continue to go against Yahweh Elohim. And her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and it was seen in her height with the multitude of her branches. But she was plucked up in fury. She was thrown down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit and any other children that she had. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire burned them up. And now she is planted in the wilderness, in a dry and thirsty ground. And fire has gone out from a rod of her branches, which has licked up her fruit, so that there is no strong rod in her to be a scepter, to rule. There is a mourning, and shall be for mourning. Israel's continuing rebellion. Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 1st verse. There was a song a little while back by a group that some of you have heard of. The title of the album was America Eats Its Young. he was talking about Vietnam. And it was the same thing that happened here with this king of Israel. And most people, this man is still around, and he looks halfway crazy now. But that album took root with some people because that's the way even history now sees the Vietnam War the same way. And once in his life, George Clinton was right. I didn't say Bill Clinton, George Clinton. Both of them were right once. And it happened in the 7th year, in the 5th month, the 10th of the month. Some of the elders of Israel came to ask of Yahweh and sat before me, Ezekiel, and sat before me and came to the word of Yahweh to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, have you come to ask of me? As I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, I will not be inquired of by you. Will you judge them, son of man? Asked Ezekiel to do it himself. Will you judge them, son of man? Will you judge them? Cause them to know the abomination of their fathers, if they didn't already. I won't deal with them anymore. You deal with them. And say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, in the day that I chose Israel and lifted up my hand to the seed of the house of Jacob and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, when I lifted up my hand to them, saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim. And the day that I lifted up my hand to them to bring them out from the land of Egypt into a land that I searched for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Then I said to them, let each man throw away the abominations of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yahweh your Elohim. But they rebelled against me and would not listen to me. They did not each man throw away their abominations of their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. And I said, I will pour out my fury against them to fulfill my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I worked for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the nations among whom they were. For I made myself known to them in their eyes by bringing them out of the land of Egypt. What he was saying here is, I'm not doing this for them. If I look weak to the other nations, that's against me. You're not going to do this to me. Verse 10, and I caused them to go out from the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my statutes and showed them my judgments, in which if a man do them, he shall even live in them. And also, I gave them my Sabbaths, plural. Whenever that is said as plural, what does it mean? Holy days as well as the Sabbath. Because they despised my judgments and walked not in my Sabbaths, plural, and they profaned my Sabbaths, plural. For their heart went after their idols, the Egyptian idols. They were an equal opportunity abuser. They didn't know whose idols they were. They were just idols to them, somebody else to worship other than him. They didn't like Yahweh much because he had power over them. They needed a pet god. That's what they needed. Just like a lot of people out there. I don't think there is anybody like that in here. I hope not. For their heart went after their idols. 17. But my eye spared them from destroying them, nor did I make an end of them in the wilderness. But I said to their sons in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, nor observe their judgments, nor defile yourself with their idols. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Walk in my statutes and keep my judgments and do them, and keep my Sabbaths, plural, holy. And they shall be a sign between me and you. If you have a sign already, you can't carry a mark and a sign at the same time. Can you? Soon find out. Soon find out. And the way you'll find out, though, if you really carry the sign. You can't carry both. One is going to get you killed. Verse 21. But the sons rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes, nor kept my judgments to do them. The judgments which if a man do, he shall even live in them. They profaned my Sabbaths, and I said I would pour out my fury on them to fulfill my anger against them in the wilderness. But I withdrew my hand and worked for my name's sake, that I should not be profaned in the eyes of the nations. He's saying here, I didn't do it for their sake. I had to keep my respect among the nations, or they would not respect me either. From whom I brought them out in their eyes. I also lifted up my hand to them in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the nations, and scatter them through other lands, because they had not done my judgments, but had despised my Sabbaths, and had profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols. Also, I gave them statutes not good, and judgments by which they should not live. Hold your finger here. I also gave them up to statutes that were not good, not in the world's sense of this, by saying that some laws were nailed to the stake or the cross, as such as some say still to this day. In that sense, Israel rejected Yahweh Elohim's law, as did the rest of the known world. But that's not what he's talking about here. Clear it up, going back to Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 8th verse. But they rebelled against me and would not listen to me. They did not each man throw away the abominations of their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. And I said, I will pour out my fury against them, to fulfill my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. Go down to in Ezekiel 20, verse 13. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which if a man does them, he shall even live in them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths, plural. And I said, I will pour out my fury on them in the wilderness to destroy them. Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 16th verse. We've gone through all this again, but the statement that he proclaimed to them will be clearer if you review these. Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 16th verse. Because they despised my judgments and walked not in my Sabbaths, and they profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. And here's the catch-all. Elohim allowed them to live under the laws, get this, if you get nothing else. Elohim allowed them to live under the laws of other nations because they didn't live under his. These were not good and just laws by which they could not live. Most nations still live by these laws today. You see the results all around you. How good their laws are. You can't walk around downtown, especially at night, because of these laws that they had so much faith in. Most nations still live by these laws today. As a result, violence is erupting all over the world because of the biased and unfair manner that these laws are enforced in the world at present. Ezekiel was declaring that in retribution, Yahweh Elohim allowed them to go after their own ways in order to punish them according to their deeds. The passage is speaking in the sense of a judicial sentence. Disobedience leads to greater sin. In this greater sin, the sin becomes its own form of punishment. Continue in Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 26th verse. And I defiled them in their own gifts. Anybody that says God doesn't have a sense of humor, read that word gifts in that context. And I defiled them in their own gifts, and that they caused all that opened the womb to pass through the fire, that I might waste them to the end, that they might know that I am Yahweh. Therefore, Son of Man, speak to the house of Israel, and say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, yet in your fathers have blasphemed me, and that they have committed a sin against me. When I had brought them out into the land for which I lifted up my hand to give it to them, that they saw every high hill and all the thick trees, and they offered their sacrifices there. And there they offered their provoking gifts. There also they made their sweet aroma and poured out their drink offerings. Everything that they were supposed to give to Yahweh, they were giving to the gods of Egypt. 29, and I said to them, what is this high place to which you go? And the name of it is called the high place. It's not there, but the word I saw was H4117. Balma. The high place was called Balma. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, so says the sovereign Yahweh, are you defiled in the same as your fathers? And do you go whoring after their abominations? For when you offer your gifts, when you make your sons to pass through the fire, that's some gift. Burning your sons up in effigy to another god, other than the one that called you out and saved you from Egypt. And shall I be inquired of by you, O house of Israel? As I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, I will not be inquired of by you. And what comes upon your spirit shall not happen at all, that you say, we will be like the other nations, like the families of the countries, to serve wood and stone. As I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out, I will reign over you. Not yet, though. This is an end time prophecy. And I will bring you out from among the people, and I will gather you out of the lands. If this is true, who is those people in Israel right now? I don't want to answer that because the answer isn't complete yet. But this clearly identifies that all of his people aren't there yet. And I will bring you out from the people, and I will gather you out of the lands in which you are scattered among them. Scattered among them, that's present perfect. With a mighty hand, and with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face. That hasn't happened yet. Just as I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, says the sovereign Yahweh. And I will cause you to pass under the rod of my son. Not a woman, a man. And I will bring you into the bond of the covenant, the one that we are under right now, under the sun. 38. And I will purge out from among you the rebels and those who sin against me. And I will bring them out from the land where they reside, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. And you, O house of Israel, so says the sovereign Yahweh, every man go and serve his idols, and do so from now on, if you will not listen to me. But never again defile my holy name with your gifts. Other white words, your children. And with your idols. For in my holy mountain, in the mountain height of Israel, says the sovereign Yahweh, mountain height of Israel, by this time, the highest point on the earth will be what? Thank you. You got to be able to read between the lines to get some of this stuff. And the only way to read between the lines effectively, to do it all the time. That was a joke right there. To them. Everybody else skipped over it. Read that again. 39. And you, O house of Israel, so says the sovereign Yahweh, every man go and serve his idols, and do so from now on, if you will not listen to me, but never again defile my holy name with your gifts of your children, and with your idols. For in my holy mountain, singular, my holy mountain, the highest point on the earth, in the mountain height of Israel, says the sovereign Yahweh, there all the house of Israel, all of those in the land shall serve me. There will I receive them, and there will I ask for your offerings and the first fruits of your offerings. What? That was all over with for everybody else. These people are going to be physical beings. How can that be? We're going to be spirit. They're not yet, because they haven't earned it yet. If you could earn that, because it's really a free gift. You can't earn it. You can't earn it. But they have to, because they said they did so many times and they didn't. And before they received their bodies of glory, they have to serve him in flesh. The first fruits of your offerings, with all your holy things. Verse 41, I will receive you with your sweet aroma when I bring you out from the people and gather you out of the lands into which you have been scattered. Have been, that's present tense. Again. Have been scattered among them. And I will be sanctified in you in the eyes of the nations. He was doing this for you to preserve you in front of the nations. And now he will bring you out for the other nations to prove to them what he's been saying to you all the time. I am who? Yahweh. Who thinks like the king, except the king? And I will be sanctified in your eyes in front of the nations. And you shall know that, say it together, I am Yahweh. When I shall bring you into the land of Israel, into the land of which I lifted up my hand to give it to your fathers. And there you shall remember your ways and all your doings in which you have been defiled. And you shall despise yourselves in your own sight for all your evils which you have committed. And you shall know that I am Yahweh, when I have worked with you for my name's sake, not according to your wicked ways, nor according to your corrupt doings, O house of Israel, says the sovereign Yahweh. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward the north, toward the south, and drop a word toward the south, and prophesy against the forest of the south field, and say to the forest of the south, hear the word of Yahweh. So says the sovereign Yahweh, behold, I will kindle a fire in you, and it shall burn up every green tree in you, and every dry tree among you. The flaming flame shall not be put out, and all faces from the south to the north shall be burned in it. And all flesh shall see that I, Yahweh, have kindled it, and shall not be put out. This is a final fire. If you don't get that last warning and come in, you'll go into this fire. And that's your last chance. 49. And I said, I Yahweh, they say of me, does he not speak parables? That's not a parable. That's real. And any questions? Any clarifications? Any comments? Dwayne?
In verse 46 that we just went over, the last part of it, prophesy against the forest of the south field, in my version, and footnote says Negev. That is a desert. That prophecy certainly came true. There's not a tree there anymore, no
Yep.
forest.
Yep.
Not even a cactus grows there.
He knew that from the beginning. That proves who he is for all those people that don't know yet. He declared the beginning from the end, from the beginning, from the end, from the end, from the beginning. And everything between, he knew already. Who else knows that? Well, we've had our frauds over the years, soothsayers and all like that, but nobody has done it so perfectly as this. Anyone else? Anyone online?
Yeah, when you was talking about the Sabbath, that really came to me when you say he chose the Sabbath, he gave us the Sabbath, and we could lose it. And I think about that a lot of times when I was going to a regular church, they didn't go in the Old Testament because you made it like it was just something in the past and wasn't going to come back again, but it is. You know, and I like it so much. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thurman.
Pastor Curtis, I was looking at my notes trying to fully realize my point again, but in Ezekiel 18, verse 24, Yahweh was saying, when a righteous man turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity and does according to all the abomination the wicked man does, shall he live, and if the righteousness which he has done shall not be remembered, because the unfaithfulness which he is guilty and the sin which he has committed, because of them he shall die. But the Judeans, you know, they thought they were given to do what they were doing in their minds, you know, like the Pharisees, you know, they thought they were righteous and, you know, kept the commandments of men, as Messiah Yeshua would say, you know. So in their minds, they thought they were righteous, and I guess not needing to do things that Yahweh was trying to tell them according to the law, because they had their own thing.
Yep. And if they continue along that path, they will be in that fire with everybody else that doesn't repent.
Okay, and my other thing was in Ezekiel chapter 18, when Yahweh was saying that the iniquities of the father, you know, won't be put on the children, and vice versa. I think I asked you about this one time in, let's see, the second commandment in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, finishing up the second commandment. It says, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. So I was trying to, again, remember why that isn't so, like him visiting the iniquity of the fathers unto the third and fourth generation.
Yeah, but he said that the answer was right there. It split them into two groups. The ones that do serve me,
okay,
and the ones that don't.
The ones that do and the ones that don't. Okay, I just want to get that clarification. Okay, so the commandment hasn't been modified. It's just two categories.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Curtis.
Dwayne.
When the father goes the wrong way, the children are going to suffer because of what he's doing, because he's going to bring evil upon the family.
If they continue to do what he does.
That will follow through. The poverty thereof will follow through. So now they can break out of that, but they seldom do.
But the chance is there. That's all he's giving us, the chance. You gotta grab hold to it and hold on to it through the fire, and it will be a fire once you go against your family. Anybody that has chosen this path already knows that. Already knows that.
It's just like parents and children. When your parents and you were raised up in a Sunday church always, and you stop going, then they think something's wrong with you. For instance, that was me, because I had raised in a Pentecostal church, and you've been in this church all your life. What are you doing? You know, you have to break. In other words, when you learn better, you're supposed to do better. So I learned that is not true. I was trying to tell my mother and father that, but they didn't want to hear that. We've been running this church for 47 years. We've been doing this a long time. So they thought it was something wrong with me. But it wasn't.
That's usually what. That's usually what happens.
Yes, but like I said, trying to save me, trying to save my soul.
Thurman.
Okay, Pastor Curtis, the last thing that struck me as a question was Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 3, when Yahweh was saying he will not be inquired of by the elders of Israel, because as long as they're being duplicitous and not being sincere and not repenting, you know, he's not going to be inquired of them, you know, and give them, you know, what they're seeking, because they're not doing right. They're just, you know, still walking in their wickedness and their idolatry. They're just not being genuine. So he told them we won't even be, you know, be inquired of by them. So that just really struck me that, you know, he turns them away because they're just not doing right. They're just rebellious and stiff-necked and everything, but they just won't get the picture. You know, they won't change.
No, they were dangled in front of by money and power, just like everybody else.
Even the good stuff that you did do. I'm done.
Because you went back to your vomit,
To the vomit.
essentially.
Yeah. You did this and then you got sidetracked and went back to doing all that stuff. Just like some organizations that I know that fell back into doing that stuff.
Anyone else? Part 7 next week. If we were here. If we're here. That is an ever-present gift.